Welcome to the online training for Trimble's EC-CAD sheet metal. In this session, we're going to look at setting up specifications inside of Part Manager, which will be loaded into the runtime catalogs of AutoCAD MEP, controlling your gauges, locks, connectors, etc. As you're drawing the ductwork. The first thing I'd like to say is that we furnish the system with our interpretation of SMACNA standards. As everyone knows, SMACNA can be interpreted several different ways with lighter gauge, heavier reinforcement, or vice versa. I'm going to go through the spec setup in Part Manager. So you're going to open up Part Manager, which I have opened right here already, and we're going to go into the configuration settings, which is the gear in the upper right-hand corner. From that, we're going to select the specifications here under the Specifications tab. These are the specifications that are furnished with the system, so I would not recommend going through here and trying to set a bunch of specs up all at once. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to take one spec table, let's say probably the 2-inch water gauge, and you're going to make a copy of ours and leave ours intact so you have something to go back to look at. So you can just highlight the table by turning it orange, by selecting it with the mouse, and then come right up here to the clone icon, which is the first icon up here, and just go ahead and hit clone. You're going to see the EC emblem come up, and then now you're going to have down here a copy of that 2-inch water gauge 5-foot TDC spec. If I want to edit this spec, I can then double click this spec to open it, and we're going to go into this spec and look at it from the fitting level. So in the fitting level here, it controls everything that's listed below this in the tree structure, and you want to have everything checked here so you can make changes to it. But right now you can see that I've got it set up for the material to be galvanized, the gauge 24, the longitudinal lock is going to be a small Pittsburgh. I've got no stiffening for my intermediate, no stiffening for the connectors, no special instructions, and the status is fabricate. Fabricate means it will download to your burn table. So we're going to now go in here to the next level down, which is going to be the rectangular level. And we're going to click on that, and now you're going to see a lot of rules appear here. So when you click on this top level rectangular here, these rules will apply here, or these values will apply unless one of these rules is going to affect it and change it. You have the ability to add rules, edit rules, and delete rules by the 3 icons in the top right-hand corner. But if I first of all look at it and I go back to my rectangular level, again, we're galvanized, we're 24 gauge, we're small Pittsburgh lock, no stiffening, no special instructions, fabricate, and we're slip and drive. These rules have different meanings. You'll notice the very first rule right here says, well, if the largest side is in range from 43 to 60.99 inches, and I click onto that rule, my gauge is changed to 22 gauge. If I come down to the next rule and say the largest side is in range of 61 to 96.99, now it's changed to 20 gauge. When I go to the third size here, largest size from 97 to 120, it's changed it to 18 gauge, and it also has changed it to a large Pittsburgh lock because 18 gauge won't go through a small Pittsburgh machine. The next rule comes in down here. It says if the duct dimension is in range of 11 to 54.99 inches, and I click that, it changes the connector from slip and drive to TDC. So from the first rule, we had it here, we had from up to 10.99 without it being even mentioned in here, it was set to slip and drive. When you're in this range, it goes to TDC. My next size range is 55 to 96.99. I click that. It's still TDC, but I've started picking up a little bit of tie rod in this. One very important factor when you're setting your specs up, if you're downloading to Fab Shop, the formerly known as Vulcan, you do not need to set up reinforcing in your spec file. Your reinforcing will be picked up the same as it is in your Vulcan when you enter it into your plasma table. Here we've got duct dimension in range from 97 to 120, so we changed it to duct mate with a stiffener here. Another rule down here is for intermediate reinforcing, where again, if you're downloading to Fab Shop, you do not need to worry with that. But that comes in here, and you can add sub rules in here as well, which this has got a sub rule to it. For instance, an example of a sub rule would be if I came up here and said, okay, if the largest side here is in range from 61 to 97, I've got that at 20 gauge. I could come in here and say, I want to build a sub rule underneath this by just going over here and hitting the plus sign while I'm on that rule, and it's adding a sub rule. So I could come in here and say, well, if the length of this piece is equal to or less than, let's say 36 inches, I just typed in the 36. That created that rule for me. Well, now I could come back here and say, maybe I can take that gauge back to 22 gauge. So you can control all your rules that you want. But what we suggest, again, is to take and make a copy of the spec table and then test it in the CAD, only one at a time. Do your 2-inch. Then once you're done with your 2-inch, you come back down here. It's going to save that spec for you. And now we're going to rename it. So up here on the toolbar, up here at the top, you'll go to the edit. And that's this right next to the delete is the edit key. Now you can go ahead and name this, and I'm going to say this is going to be 2-inch water gauge, and I'm just going to say this is going to be for Trimble. So this is for my company. And so now I've got this, my 2-inch water gauge for Trimble. If you need to move this around in the list and want to keep them in some type of an order, these arrows will allow you to move that spec file up to get it up to the other 2-inch water gauge locations there, and just keep everything kind of together if you'd like. And that's the way you set up your spec tables in EC-CAD.
We hope you enjoyed this video. See what's next in our product tips playlist, or visit mep.trimble.com for even more product resources.